And our first speaker today is Johan Eriksson, who's head of specialists at Google. And he's going to be talking about 3 leadership principles that work no matter what happens in the world. That's a bold, bold promise. I'm looking forward to this. And Johan believes the only long-term sustainability strategy for organizations in the world is to evolve faster than the world is changing and to translate all of that into relevant innovation. And to make that happen, he believes we need a revolution in learning and innovation. In this session, we're going to look at the technology trends that contribute most to business development right now, such as machine learning, AI, automation, user experience, learning and innovation. And as the head of specialists at Google, if anyone knows about making decisions in a digitalized world, he certainly does. So, Johan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Malcolm.
Johan, it's really great. Where are you sitting today? Where are you speaking to us from?
So today I'm speaking to you from Stockholm in Sweden.
Stockholm, Sweden. Great. And I'm really excited to hear your talk. So if you're ready, please take it away.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I mean, first off, I think we're all learners in this game, which is why I printed this T-shirt that says "Lifelong Learner."
Great.
Because of reminding me of who I want to be every single day.
So I would love one of those T-shirts.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get you one.
Okay. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So when it comes to what I'm going to cover today, it's going to be much less about technology and much more about the leadership aspect of what do we need to do as leaders to make sure that we work in a long-term sustainable way in light of change. So 3 principles. I know it's a bold statement that works no matter what happens, but hopefully you'll sort of agree with me towards the end of this session. So I think the first question that I want to ask to you and that I ask myself is, do things change? And this may seem like an obvious question because most people would agree, no matter what background you have or which country you live in, etc., people will say, yes, things change. But what follows from that is what I find really interesting. And that is that, as Malcolm mentioned in the beginning, if things change, and that is the only thing that we can sort of know for sure, then per definition, the only long-term sustainable strategy for any individual on the planet, for any leader, but also for any company or nation or organization, is to learn things faster than the world changes around you and translating that learning into meaningful innovation. This is the only long-term sustainable thing that you have. I mean, everything else has a due date on it. So if you think about a great cost structure, a good CEO, whatever, those things have a due date on them at some point in time. So what you have is learning and innovation. So you need to ask yourself the question, do I know what I learn a week? If you don't, that means that you're leaving learning to chance rather than to learning is far too in that, just as you have resources set aside for innovation. So the 3 principles that I was planning to sort of take you through are these 3 very fundamental principles. So number 1, you need to choose to be a leader and not a follower and have clear values guiding in that direction, because that will help you navigate change. It will help you navigate crisis. Number 2, you need to learn. You need to always be learning, and you need to enable people that you lead to learn as well. And number 3, you need to innovate. And I would challenge you to innovate meaningful things. I think we've seen that in today's world, that we need to focus a lot on what's truly meaningful to build better society. So let's get straight into it. So number 1, choosing to be a leader with clear values. This came from, the research in this field came from Carol Dweck originally, talking about the fixed versus growth mindset. So if you have a fixed mindset, then you believe that you're born with what you have. Like, you believe that you have the knowledge you have, the talent you have, etc., etc. If you have a growth mindset, and you can choose every single day which mindset you have, but if you have a growth mindset, then you believe that you can grow, you can learn anything, you can shape your world around you. So if you have a fixed mindset, your focus is as a leader to deliver without failing. That's going to be your focus. But if you have a growth mindset, your focus as a leader will be to always develop and grow. And that is very different from a sort of leadership perspective. So if you look at the language of people who have a fixed versus growth mindset, that's how you recognize sort of leaders who have a fixed versus growth mindset. Because leaders with a sort of fixed mindset, or even was a bit bold and wrote victim here, is the typical language of, there's nothing I can do, it's just the way I am, I don't have a talent for that, I can't, I must, etc., etc. But the language of a leader, they talk about, let's look at all alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings. I can learn how to do it. I choose, I prefer. Or the question, what would it take to do that? Which is a very sort of mind-opening question. So the way to get started of choosing to be a leader is to force yourself to always tell the truth. Is to force yourself to recognize that you can impact what leader you are and what leader you choose to be. I call this the late for dinner or I don't have time syndrome, because sometimes you would hear someone call home and say, hey, honey, sorry, I can't be home for dinner tonight because I need to stay at work and finish up this thing. That is in 100% of cases a lie. In 100% of cases, that is not the truth, it's a lie. The truth would be, hey, honey, I'm still at work. This evening, work is more important to me than having dinner with you. So therefore, I'm going to choose to stay at work and finish up this thing, even though I could come home and have dinner with you. So bon appetit. That is the truth. Like, that is the truth, because your legs seem to be working, hopefully still, or you're in a wheelchair and you can get home independent. You can get home. You can choose to go home. But you're going to lie to yourself. And that creates a problem, because only when you start telling that truth will you force yourself to not put yourself in that situation where you feel that you have to stay at work. Maybe you start planning ahead better. Maybe you have that tough conversation with your manager about late deadlines or whatever is the situation. Just like when people say, I don't have time. Of course, everyone has time. It's the most democratized asset in the world. Everyone seems to have roughly 24 hours per day. I mean, if I'm not mistaken. So every second you get more time, right? So you have time always, but you may not make it a priority. But only when you start to tell yourself that truth instead of the lie, I don't have time, will you start to dress up as a leader that control your life, your company, and sort of the values that you represent. So force yourself to always tell the truth. That's a good starting point. And then choose what values you want to represent as a leader. And a value is something that you want to work for that you will never be done with. And sometimes people confuse values with goals. So just sort of spell that out. A goal is something you can achieve. A value is something you will never be done with. So for example, I have a value of taking care of my body. So that's something that I will try to do for the rest of my life. But I can have a goal to run a marathon in less than 3 hours, and I can achieve that, and then I'm done with that goal, but I still have the value in the base. Or I can have a value of learning about other cultures, and that is something I will carry with me as a leader throughout my life. Then I can learn to speak French. That's a goal. So be clear about what values you want to have, and companies and organizations also needs to have values, and you as a leader needs to embody them. So taking a couple of fictive examples, but if a player in the toy industry could have the value to make playing sustainable by providing fewer, bigger, and better experiences. So today in the developed world, children has on average 238 toys each. The question is, do we think that's long-term sustainable, that all the world's children have 238 toys each? Or do we need a different leadership value set here from the get-go? Grocery retailing, to step change national health by making it easy to make good choices for you. If you look in the cashier line, what you place there sells on average more than 300% better than what you place in the back in the shelf. And I'm not sure about you, but I don't always see just broccoli in the cashier line, right? So people are not really taking responsibility for national health in the grocery retail business, but someone could, and they could make that a value. Or construction industry, to only give our customers positive surprises. Like, imagine that. I don't know if you've had to deal with handicraft people, but when they come and say, listen, we need to talk, it doesn't always end with, oh, things went much better than we thought, here's some money back, and we finished up ahead of time, and we cleaned up after ourselves, etc., etc. It's normally a different story. So values is something that you as a leader needs to sort of harmonize with your organization. And a good place to start, even though it may seem super depressing, is to start thinking about, what do you want to be remembered for? What's your legacy? What do you want people to talk about at your funeral? And then work yourself backwards to what choices do I need to make? What values do I want to embody? So what should it say here? Back to Malcolm's point in the beginning. Should it say streamed a lot of Netflix on your tombstone? Is that what it should say? If so, then go ahead and stream a lot of Netflix. I'm not saying that Netflix is bad. I think it's great for taking a break, but I think that's what it's for, taking a break. So, should it say 2% revenue growth? Of course, it's great for many companies to deliver 2% revenue growth. But you need to decide, what is the value that you want to be known for? Transform my industry for the better, or cared about my people could be a value. Imagine at your funeral, people talking about how much you cared about the people working for you and with you. So choose to be a leader and have clear values. I think that creates trust. It creates stability, independent of how the world is changing around you, and that will help your organization. Next one, learn. Always be learning and always enable your organization to learn as well. So important things to know about learning and the science of learning. Two things. Number one, you can learn anything. And this is so mind-opening and it's so great. If you read the book Peak, that summarizes a bit of the science of learning, you will see that the brain is plastic, the body is plastic. We can shape them into anything that we want. So people say that, he has such a talent for that. Well, talent doesn't really have support in research, right? People are not born programmers. People are not born CEOs. People are not born musicians even. So Mozart, he played 6 hours straight for 6 days a week from the age of 3. You try doing anything 6 hours straight, 6 days per week from the age of 3, and you will become quite good at it at the age of 14. So, you can learn anything. That's great. And go ahead and learn whatever you want to learn. But number two, learning doesn't happen automatically. You need to design for learning, because just working it doesn't enable you to become a better leader. Because what happens then is that you fall into something called the good enough trap. The same second that you think that you're a good enough leader, your development as a leader will stop. And over time, research suggests that it will actually decline a bit. So if you compare doctors that have been working longer versus shorter, the doctors that have been working shorter normally perform a bit better than doctors that have been working longer, for two reasons. Number one, they base their education on newer best practice. So their education is based on newer best practice. But number two, in both cases, they made a mistake thinking that just working enabled them to learn. Of course, there's some learning element in that, but you need to build in feedback loops in your work as a leader if you're gonna learn and if you're gonna grow. So you can learn anything, that's great, but make sure that you design for learning, because it's not gonna happen by itself. And start by resourcing it. If you as a leader don't invest time in learning, you're not gonna learn. So you need to decide for yourself, how much am I gonna invest in learning, and make that decision and make that clear and make that transparent to your organization as well. And then fill that time with fun ways of learning. Learning is so great when you make it fun. So there are different ways to learn. Here's a subset of a menu that I've shared with all specialists at Google, that they can pick from various ways of learning. One way that I've been using for the past months that I find truly enjoyable is to have a monthly lunch with someone. So every month for the past 7 years, I've had a lunch, or now I have a virtual lunch, obviously, because of social distancing, but I have a lunch with someone that I don't know since before, but that knows a lot about something that I need to learn more about. And I made this a habit. Maybe I read a book that they wrote, maybe I saw them on the news or whatever. I track them down, I call them up, I'm like, hey, this is Johan. They like, Johan who? I'm like, that's irrelevant. What is important is the concept of monthly lunches. And sort of in 1 hour, I get a life's worth of knowledge in an area I want to learn more about, packaged in a great conversation. So that's one way of learning. But there are many different ways that you can learn. So see this as a menu, eat what sort of looks to taste good, and make that part of your habit of learning, of how you learn. So fill up those hours from this menu, and then pencil in yourself 10 minutes every week where you look at, what did I learn last week? What am I going to learn next week? Hand on heart, am I learning faster than the world around me? Am I learning faster than my competitors? Am I learning faster than other leaders? Am I learning faster about digital technology than other people, etc.? And if you can't be honest with yourself and say, yes, I am, then you need to change something. And my advice, when building a new habit, if you look at, the research within habit building, you can read B.J. Fogg, Tiny Habits, if you haven't read that one. But if you look at research within habit building, you will find that one of the biggest reasons why people fail forming a new habit is that they have too high ambition from the start and they don't make it part of their daily routine. So you see that around New Year's, right? People who didn't exercise suddenly are going to start exercising 6 times per week. Check in after a couple of months to see where they are at. It's better to start small and then scale up. So if you as a leader start by investing just 30 minutes every week of learning something new in a fun way of learning, that's great. Stick to those 30 minutes, never sort of miss it. And then you can start to scale up over time until you are at a place where you want to be. So really, pencil in 10 minutes with yourself every week. Check what did I learn last week? What am I going to learn next week? And is this hand on heart good enough? All right. So always learn and enable others to learn. Encourage your sort of people in your organization to learn and invest in learning, because if they don't, the rest of the world will move past you at some point. So it's so important that we recognize this is the only long-term sustainable strategy for a organization and for you as a leader. All right. Next one, innovate. Because learning without innovation is a bit selfish, right? You learn a bunch of things and then you never translate it into something real that the world can see. And if I were to only sort of highlight one process within innovation, it would be this process. So how do you scout new innovation? How do you pilot new innovation in your organization? And how do you scale new innovation? So if you're a leader and you can't in 1 minute summarize how you scout, pilot, and scale new innovation, again, that means that you're leaving innovation a little bit too much to chance rather than to design. So it cannot be up to the CTO to have happened to read a blog, and that's why you're now sort of piloting this thing. It needs to be a little bit more data-driven than that and a little bit more scalable than that. So how do you scout new innovation? How do you ensure that if something pops up relevant to your organization anywhere in the world, you will be one of the first to know? How do you pilot new innovation? So when you found out that, this may be something for us, take machine learning as an example. Then you need to ask yourself, how do we pilot machine learning in our organization? What are the use cases we want to apply to? Do you have a certain geography where you always pilot things? Do you have a certain business unit where you always pilot things, specific products, et cetera, et cetera? But you need to decide that. And then how do we scale things? How do we know if the pilot was successful? So that has become an endless debate between ourselves. But how do we rapidly scale things? So I spoke to one company, and they have as a strategy that within 2 weeks of a new innovation popping up, they should have piloted and concluded on the results in their organization. That's their ambition. 2 weeks. I think that's super ambitious and great. And I became very happy when I heard about that, because for most companies, 2 years is normally the time frame we're more realistically looking at. But that's not going to be sustainable. So what is your strategy for scouting, for piloting, and for scaling new innovation, whether that's technology like machine learning or cloud computing, or whether it's something else? So really, really important. And what I would like to challenge everyone on a little bit as well is to invest in meaningful innovation. And I'm going to use an example now, and I don't want to offend anyone, but just to make this point. So if you've read the book Factfulness by Hans Rosling or taken part of any of that research, then you'll know that 1 billion people on the planet uses their finger or a stick to brush their teeth. 1 billion people. Another 3 billion people can afford to invest in a toothbrush, but it's still a shared toothbrush between the family. You share it with your sister, your father, your grandfather, etc. Another 2 billion people can afford your own toothbrush. That's great. And finally, 1 billion people can invest in an electrical toothbrush. So this is roughly what it looks like. And if you look at the value of these different innovations, I mean, using your stick, your finger or a stick to brush your teeth, it adds some value. So if you're in that situation, please do. But the real value comes with a toothbrush, even if it's a shared toothbrush. That's a huge step in value. An additional value, your own toothbrush for obvious reasons. And and then some additional value for the electrical toothbrush because of nudging, making it easy to brush for minimum 2 minutes. But if you pick between a Pepsodent Ultra Reach Extra Soft or a Colgate Max White 1 Sonic Power Medium or a Philips Sonicare Diamond Clean Smart, the sort of difference is not going to be tremendous, right? It's not going to be tremendous. So, and I'm not saying that we don't need incremental improvements. We do, and I think that's great. But what I'm saying is that where do you want to focus? Do you want to do A, innovation, or do you want to do B, innovation? So I would challenge you to strike the right balance between A and B so that you don't only get hooked up in B type of innovation. So with this, always innovate meaningful things, because that's what we need. So if you choose to be a leader and use that language of saying, I always have time. I may not choose to prioritize it, but I always have time. And if you have clear values that you share with the organization so they know who you are and what they can trust you for. Like back to Malcolm's point in the beginning, people appreciate it when you get to know them, get to know their values and share yours. If you learn, always be learning and enable others to learn. And if you always innovate meaningful things, then you will be able to navigate whatever the future holds. My final point, wrapping up, is that it's very important that we actually do this. In Sweden, where I'm based, sometimes people say, it's the thought that counts. It's the thought that counts. Maybe you've heard that expression before. But let's be clear about one thing. It is not the thought that counts. Definitely not. That's just mumbo jumbo. It's the action that counts. Culture doesn't need strategy for breakfast. Action needs everything for breakfast. So there are two types of leaders in the world. And it's leaders who are thinking about learning and innovating. And it's leaders who are learning and innovating. And every single day you choose which one that you want to be. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I've got a lot of questions myself, but you're going to have some audience questions as well. But if I could just start with the first question, because I'm also really passionate about values. I go out and work with organizations on that topic. And I really believe, values are the engines of our decisions. Everything we do, every decision we make all day long is coming at some level from our values. So how important do you think it is that leaders understand their team, like the people in their team's values? You touched on it, but how much do you think that's important?
I think it's absolutely instrumental. I think if you don't know your own values and have them written down somewhere so that you actually commit to them, and if you don't know your team's values, then at some point that's going to be a challenge, right? Because you don't know if they run in that direction or that direction. And what I find is very beautiful is that, this rhymes very well with diversity, because it's fine to have sort of different values that you prioritize in your life. But when you know them, then you also know how to best sort of use everyone, where everyone comes into play. So values is absolutely instrumental.
Yeah, I think it's really critical. We had you've been talking about, you mentioned doctors, and I think that this has prompted an audience question, which is, can you address the idea or challenge of unlearning? Because, in order to innovate, we also need to unlearn things. So, if unlearning is the process of discarding something from your memory, what are your ideas around that? Do you have any insights about how to move forward on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said in that field, obviously, so won't be able to cover it fully or give it full justice. But, it's easy. For example, if we take habits, for example, it's easier to replace a bad habit with a good habit than just to remove the bad habit, because it will create a void and that thing is easily creep back again. So it's a bit with learning. So what I would do is that I would focus at what's my values, what's my direction in life, what do I need to learn in order to better live by those values, and then I would approach learning that and building habit structures for that learning, because then that will help push out the things that you don't need in your life. But everything boils down to habits, right? So I would start off.
And I also think the growth mindset that you mentioned is I don't think there's any person entering the workforce today that can can survive without having a growth mindset, simply because the amount of change that's happening is just too overwhelming to have a fixed mindset. And so, I think that it's a growth mindset is going to be as an important thing to have on your CV, and we'll probably have great analytics to measure that as anything else moving forward. One of the things you touched on that which I really liked was your language around moving from victim to leader. And I think that there's a lot of things that you had on the screen, and I only glanced at them quickly. But as a person with a background in NLP, I'm a nut about language. I'm crazy about language. And I thought what was really interesting about everything that was on the victim side, all the comments you had, were statements of uncertainty that generate a lot of uncertainty. But on the side where you move to that leadership side, it's really about generating a lot of certainty for the team through the way that you communicate to them. Do you have any ideas or anything you could share around that?
Yeah. No, I think there's a person called Viktor Frankl who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning that he wrote 2 weeks after getting out of the Auschwitz concentration camp and being one of the few surviving that. And he talks about that even in the toughest of situations, you have a choice. And, that is both a provocative and an enabling statement. It's provocative because if you have a victimization mindset and you get some energy from that, because nagging will give you attention, then it's very tough if someone says, hey, actually, you have a choice. You don't need to look at the world the way you look at the world.
Yep.
So it's provocative, but it's also enabling, because every single day you can choose to have a growth mindset. And also what I appreciate with the growth mindset is that it's the truth, right? The research, the evidence base suggests you have a plastic brain, you have a plastic body. So it's the truth. You can develop, you can evolve. And
it is very provocative to, point that out to people, because it does mean that people then have to take a lot more responsibility for what's showing up in their life. We have a very interesting question from Suzanne, one of our viewers. Do you think that individuals will actually learn more now and in the future after COVID-19 because of all the innovations that are happening around the lockdown, I guess, or will individuals fall back to the old normal because we're lazy as human beings?
Yeah, great question. I don't think we're lazy as human beings, just to be clear on that one. But what I think is important is that the society teams up with businesses of building the right structures to enable continuous learning now that more people than ever have this top of mind, that you actually need to continue learning. But if we go back thinking that, you do 5 years at university and then, you do the occasional corporate training, then I think we're going to go back to where we were before COVID-19. Yep. But if we create new structures where we implement learning hours at work, where we, make it just easier for people and nudge people in the direction of lifelong learning, then I think it's going to be different, because the best life insurance you can have right now is lifelong learning.
I couldn't agree more. One last quick question. You talked about your gravestone. What will be on your gravestone?
Yeah, no, I hope there will be many things on my gravestone, because I have more than one value. But I think one thing is caring about people.
Great.
And that's what I'm hoping, because at the end of the day, it's only people that matters. It's only making things better for people that matters. Everything else is secondary.
And thank you for saying that, because that really came up really big yesterday, that all the efficiencies we're creating, they should be for the benefit of humans. So thank you so much for being with us. We have to leave the conversation there, but it's an honor to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to my t-shirt. Size small. I just lost 5 kilos, so I can fit back into a small. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.